In southwestern Russia, the crew of a Flydubai Boeing 737 are battling terrible weather on their final approach. Winds shake the aircraft violently and the crew is forced to go around. But just a minute later, the plane crashes onto the landing runway almost vertically. What went wrong and how could this strange accident happen? Find out with me today and subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Airspace. On March 19th, 2016, Flydubai 981 was en route to Rostov-on-Don, a large city in southwestern Russia with over 1 million residents. The Boeing 737 was just 6 years old and was of the 800 version, the newest version before the controversial MAX variant. On the flight deck were a 38-year-old captain from Cyprus and a 37-year-old first officer from Spain. Such multicultural crew compositions are common for many airlines, especially low-cost ones like Flydubai. As the flight approached Rostov-on-Don, the crew got the weather reports for their destination. They did not look too promising, indicating strong winds blowing, a somewhat low cloud cover, rain and mist. Luckily, the wind seemed to be blowing almost from the direction of runway 22, their intended landing runway. Seeing this, the pilots prepared for a bumpy ride, since there were also reports about strong turbulence and wind shear on final approach. A wind shear is a phenomenon that happens when the wind changes its speed or direction rapidly over a short vertical distance. If an aircraft enters such a wind shear, it experiences a rapid loss or gain in airspeed. The gain part is not too concerning, but the loss of airspeed may be. If a plane experiences a rapid loss of airspeed, it loses a lot of lift. If this happens close to the ground, a recovery may not be possible. Therefore, the utmost care is indicated if one reads reports about wind shear on approach. Luckily, modern airliners are equipped with wind shear warning systems that indicate when wind shear is encountered. Planes using the latest weather radar technology, like the 737 used by Flydubai, even have a predictive wind shear warning system. It works by scanning the rain density and movement in the air masses ahead of the plane. If the radar detects that somewhere raindrops are changing their direction rapidly, they assume that there must be a wind shear at that position and the plane will issue a warning that sounds like this.
Go around. Wind shear ahead.
It is one of the rare cases where a warning actually verbally tells the pilots what to do. Go around, right now, there's danger straight ahead. But now let's get back to Flydubai 981 who was on final approach to runway 22. The aircraft was nicely established on the instrument landing system beam and it had just broken through cloud cover. The captain, who was at controls that night, remarked that he had the runway in sight as he was fighting the mighty gusts of wind. But suddenly, the warning I described to you earlier sounded through the cockpit. Go around, wind shear ahead. The crew initiated the wind shear escape maneuver immediately, pushing the thrust levers forward to provide maximum thrust, and pulled the nose up to urge the plane to climb. In that moment, all that matters is that the aircraft climbs away from the ground and leaves the wind shear as fast as possible. Therefore, the procedure is slightly different from a standard go-around. The flaps and the landing gear are initially not retracted, since the focus of the pilots should at that moment only remain on flying the aircraft to a safe altitude. The pilots did just that, escaped the wind shear and thereafter retracted the flaps and the landing gear. Now the captain decided that it would be best to fly to a nearby holding pattern and hold there for a while until the weather clears up a bit and the wind dies down somewhat. The flight had enough fuel to fly for several more hours, which is unusual. But due to the very high fuel prices in Rostov compared to Dubai, the pilots of Flydubai 981 had decided to load more fuel at their home base where it was cheaper. Now, as they flew their turns in the holding pattern, they patiently waited for the weather to pass. During that time, the crew of an Aeroflot Sukhoi aircraft attempted to land at Rostov twice, but went around both times and eventually diverted to another airport where the weather was more favourable. During that time, the pilots of Flydubai 981 discussed what they should do: remain in the holding pattern and attempt another approach at Rostov later on, or divert right away. Their process of decision making was not very structured and they really took their time. The flight remained in a holding pattern for over 1.5 hours. This is unusually long. Thereafter, the pilots decided to try another approach at Rostov. Should they have to go around again, they would immediately divert to another airport. 17 minutes later, as the plane was again nicely established on the instrument landing system and fully configured for landing, the crew suddenly experienced a very strong headwind gust. This gust brought the airspeed up all the way to the limit speed the flaps can handle, and the captain quickly reacted by initiating another go-around. But since this time there was no wind shear warning, the captain initiated a normal go-around procedure and commanded the retraction of the landing gear and one step off the flaps by the first officer. However, he applied the maximum amount of available thrust as his procedure for the wind shear escape maneuver, not for the go-around procedure. For the go-around, a limited amount of thrust would have sufficed. Now, as the landing gear and the flaps retracted, this change in aerodynamic properties of the 737 led to a pitch-up moment. Additionally, the engines that are mounted below the wing now provided their maximum available thrust. Since the engines are mounted away from the center of gravity, they too produce a nose-up moment when they provide thrust. Now, all these factors provided a large combined nose-up force. This was good to some extent since the plane needed to climb anyway and therefore needed to raise the nose to about 15 degrees nose-up. However, when the captain reached this angle, he lowered the nose again to about 10 degrees and the plane accelerated. He then lowered the nose more and more, always remaining between 18 and 4 degrees nose up. All this time, the captain needed to push the control column forward to stop the plane from raising the nose further due to the nose-up tendency provided by the powerful engines to the very light airplane. The pushing force that the captain had to exert with one hand was about 50 pounds, quite strong. Flight should not be maintained like this for long. Such a situation is called an out-of-trim situation and can easily be rectified by pushing the trim switches on the control column. These move the horizontal stabilizer on the tail of the plane in a way that such forces can be neutralized, and the plane is easily flyable with one hand again. The captain now did exactly that. He pushed forward on the trim switches. Now the pressure on the control column would have eased and the plane stabilized. However, the captain did not stop pushing the control column forward while he was trimming the plane to be more and more nose heavy. Soon, the plane went from a pitch of more than 10 degrees nose up to a negative pitch. That means the plane pitched towards the ground. The first officer exclaimed, "Be careful," first, then, "No, don't do that," and finally, No, don't do that, pull it." But the captain did not pull it, he just kept on trimming the plane nose down and pushing the control column forward. The plane, having reached a maximum altitude of just 3,300 feet, started a rapid descent at an angle of over 50 degrees nose down and a speed of 340 knots. That is almost 400 miles per hour or 630 kilometers per hour. The plane soon hit the runway below and immediately disintegrated into tiny pieces. None of the 62 occupants survived the impact with the force of a missile. The investigation soon began and investigators found the cockpit voice and flight data recorders in good enough conditions to be read. They were unable to find any significant technical faults of the 737, and there had been no signs of incapacitation or suicidal tendencies of the captain. However, the investigators were puzzled by the strange control inputs by the captain. He seemed to be unable to maintain the target pitch of 15 degrees during the go-round, ever increasing the pitch of the 737. After that, he also started providing erratic rudder inputs with his feet. This further solidified the theory formed by the investigators, since the rudder pedals are almost never used during normal flight when not landing the plane. Finally, the committee was able to determine the cause of the accident. The captain had fallen victim to a basic sensory illusion called a somatographic illusion. This kind of illusion is used in flight simulators or roller coaster rides and induces a feeling of motion in a person when in fact there is no such motion at all, but an acceleration. Imagine you are rapidly accelerating in your car. You will be pushed in your seat quite forcefully. Now think about your last roller coaster ride. On the way up to the top, you also were pushed into your seat quite strongly, even though you were just moving up at a slow speed. If you remove vision from a person, let's say for example a pilot who enters a cloud like the pilots of Flydubai 981, this person is no longer able to tell whether it feels an acceleration or is pushed into the seat because it's pitching up. The captain of Flight 981 must have believed the plane was pitching up more and more as it was accelerating during the go-round, because he did not maintain the proper pitch of 15 degrees, but lowered the nose. To him, it must have felt like the plane's nose rose more and more and that the plane must be dangerously close to a stall that he had to prevent at all cost. At this time, he had completely lost all situational awareness and must have become overwhelmed by his illusions. A simple glance at the instruments would have told him that he was completely wrong and that the situation could have been fixed very easily and the plane was not in any real danger. However, he did not, and as he pushed the nose down more and more, the plane reached a negative G-load. Everything in the cockpit lifted up: manuals, debris, dust and dirt. This effect is highly confusing to pilots who have never experienced it, and it would have increased the captain's state of disorientation. During the descent, the captain now provided more erratic and random inputs to the ailerons and the rudder, underlining his complete loss of situational awareness. Meanwhile, the first officer was shouting at him to stop it and pull up, but the captain did not or could not listen. Also, the first officer only took control from the captain when it was too late. There were several attempts at pulling the control column, but too little, too late. Accidents like this always leave me a bit confused. How can trained, experienced professionals fall victim to such basic illusions? I can't explain it, maybe because they were under stress or very tired, since the flight took place in the middle of the night? But no explanation can be found, obviously. Both the captain and the first officer had good training records and had never fallen victim to such an illusion before. Before I leave you for the outro, I'd like to thank all of you for the great support you showed since I started this channel. I remember well when I used to get like 10 or 15 views a day, and I can't believe there are over 1,000 of you guys subscribed now. Thanks a lot! However, the aviation industry is suffering greatly at the moment, and I decided to go back to school to have a backup plan in case I would be forced to quit my job in the next few months or years. Therefore, I will now be uploading my videos on Friday from now on, instead of on Monday. That said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked this week's video. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next week.